Liam, thanks for taking the time to do this. First things first, man, how you doing?
I'm not too bad, thanks, mate. I say it's been warm recently. It's definitely could do with some air conditioning, but no, it's been pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm cool. Same, really. Yeah, I mean, I love summer, but once what, we're in England, innit? We're in the UK. Once it get, we want all we want is heat. The moment it gets hot, all we do is moan that it's hot.
That's it. And then we always have the good old British rain as well. So there's not a lot we can do about that either, unfortunately.
Yeah, whereabouts are you?
At Wigan.
Wigan. Okay. Yeah, London's
So,
though quite some. I don't even know how to get to Wigan.
just head north.
Basically, yeah, just head north.
Yeah, north of the wall.
Yeah, well, the north is, it always seems to be in the news in some way or another, and particularly in regards to the situation we've kind of been in the UK for the last 15 odd months. And without going too much into it, it's really just to kind of gauge how you personally have been kind of holding up during this period.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of the sort of fortunate people in a way, because I don't think it's affected me too much. I've still been able to go into work and everything, so I've still been going into the office throughout all of that. So the morning routine's never really changed. It's still always been a case of get up, showered, get dressed, go to work, and all that's been there. Socializing's obviously been a little bit different because you can't or couldn't go out to pubs and stuff and restaurants to meet up with friends. But again, quite fortunate in the fact that a lot of my friends play games and stuff. So we've just been able to sort of sit around and chat as we normally would, and sort of still just get along and socialize, which has been good. The sort of one of the hardest things, I suppose, has been not being able to play live, and then even like trying to write an album through lockdown was pretty challenging. But yeah, on the whole, I think I've sort of got through it pretty unscathed compared to some people, and it's been very, very challenging for quite a few people.
Yeah, considering that. So when like you're asked kind of like how you've been holding up, how things have been for you and so on, do you kind of get like feel like a guilt complex because you can turn around and sort of say, look, it hasn't really affected me?
Yeah, massively. And then you sort of feel guilty about feeling guilty, and it's like a knock-on effect. But yeah, because like I say, I do know that I'm quite fortunate in the fact that it hasn't affected me, but at the same time, like I'm lucky that it hasn't as well. You know what I mean? So it's a hard one. It's a hard sort of pill to swallow, because like you say, especially when people that I work with closely and friends and relatives and stuff, like I know it has hit them hard.
Yeah.
So you do. You feel guilty for sort of not being affected as much. I mean, I don't know whether it's affected you much or.
Other than catching it myself, I've been very fortunate as well. The job I do meant that I was at work as per normal. My loss has been not being able to go to see bands, live music, and so on. But in the grand scheme of things, you end up, as I say about the guilt thing, we end up going, look, there are bigger things going on here right now. I'm not going to be sitting here saying, oh, poor me, I can't see Boss Keloid live while tens of thousands of people die and stuff like that. It's trying to get the balance right, where you kind of, I guess, you said it there yourself, while you may not be directly affected, and I don't think I've been directly affected, people who have been, and that's the thing, it's touched everyone in some way, Yeah,
definitely.
But aside from the new album, because obviously that is the major focus of this period as well, what else then has been kind of keeping you busy? Has it just been work and just relaxing, I guess?
Yeah, pretty much. Work does take up a lot of time. It's one of the joys of having a full-time job, I suppose. But in between that, I've sort of been working on like a little bit of a Keloid project, which was linked to recording. So it's, going through some video footage, trying to edit that together. So hopefully we'll be able to mention a bit more about that soon. And then we've recently done a live playthrough of the recent album. And the guys did the same with Melted, where they went back into like a studio and played it in full from start to finish in like a live setting. So we went back down to Fall to do that, because the live room in there is just like, it sounds amazing, it looks amazing. So yeah, it was we've been sort of working through the tunes and getting back to a sort of a point where it's comfortable playing those live and comfortable enough to record it so that other people can hear it as well.
And I suppose as well, it's kind of time to a degree to kind of get the practice in as well, because although question marks exist over everything still, we are in theory towards the light at the end of the tunnel. And I guess, I mean, we already know you've got plans later in the year. We'll get to that at the end, but yeah, I guess it's kind of time where it's almost like, okay, yeah, like time to get back on the train with the band.
Yeah. And I said, and that was one of the hardest things about trying to write as well, because it was right at the start of the first lockdown where we were, well, I think at the time we were due to go into the studio in either May or June 2020.
Oh, wow.
I mean, in a way, it was a little bit of a get out of jail free card for us, because we were probably, in hindsight, we were probably nowhere near ready. So having like, I think it was best part of 3 or 4 months where we couldn't even really practice in the same room or do anything. It was just put a massive halt on everything. So it was, it was challenging to get back into that, because you go from not really playing as much in a room with the guys to, all right, well, not only have we got to get back to practicing, but we need to get back into that mindset and back into that flow of writing, because we're now going in the studio in like 6 months' time.
Did you have any concerns personally, just you? Did you have any concerns when it kind of came to doing it, that you were going to be not so much rusty, but more the idea that you might not perhaps have the same level of enthusiasm you maybe had a year before?
Yeah, and it's sort of the thing of, you want to do it justice. So especially when you're on a roll and once you sort of get going and you come with quite a few good ideas and you get them down and it's like, oh yeah, we're onto something. Then all of a sudden, yeah, stop all that. Come back in like 4 months. It's like, oh, are we going to be able to get back on it? Are we all going to be in the same mindset? People say people have been affected by COVID and everything else. So it's like, oh, well, are people going to think the same? Are we going to be able to just get back on? But luckily, let's say it's one of the good things about having played with each other so long, I suppose, is that within 1 or 2 practices, it was almost like, oh yeah, this is how we do this, right? Okay.
I love that as well. I mean, because like you're talking about trying to get into the studio during the first lockdown. That was the period where we really didn't know anything, and we were under the impression or led to believe that, oh, in 3 weeks' time or in 2 months' time, it'll all be fine and stuff like that. So credit to you for being stuck with that situation and getting to this very point where the album is now out.
Yeah, cheers, man. It was probably one of the most challenging things of all of lockdown for me personally. But yeah, like I say, it's once recording was done, that was a big relief, and then it was like, all right, well, now we need to get onto the sort of campaign of pushing it and get all the stuff moving in the background. So
that busy period, yeah. I mean, yes, for those who do not know, Family the Smiling Thrush, it is out now. It was out on June the 4th via Report Music. Take my word for it, I think this album is absolutely phenomenal and one of the best things I've heard this year. So do check it out. Has the dust for you settled? Have you kind of come now it's out and it's out there and people are listening to it, and I imagine you get a lot more, not necessarily critical reviews, but more fan-based thoughts and stuff?
Yeah. So like I say, it only came out 5 days from point of recording this. So yeah, like sort of it's still sort of going on now. Like I say, there's been a few sort of reviews before that where, it was submitted to people beforehand to do all the reviews and everything. But yeah, like the fan reviews coming in now, there's still a lot of feedback coming from family, friends, loads of people on social media and stuff. And like, it's amazing to see the response to it. It's been overwhelmingly positive, which when you put anything new out there, it's always a bit of a gamble as to, is it going to be good? Are people going to like it? Is it too different from what people are going to be expecting? All those kind of things. And like we really didn't think people would get it, but we never really think people are going to get it because it's always crazy. There's a lot going on, so it does take a while to sort of digest it all. And every time you listen to it, you find something else that you perhaps didn't spot the first time and stuff like that. But like I said, we love it. It's probably, we'd argue it's probably the best album that we've ever written from a personal point of view, and it's good to see that, you know, other people do like it and they do get it, and it's just nice of people to sort of go out of the way to say, you know, thanks or well done, because like no one needs to do that really. You know, as much as they can enjoy it, it's good that people want to just sort of say like this, cheers guys, this is good kind of thing. It's like there's no better feeling than knowing that it's resonating with people and, you know, they're enjoying it.
And it's good as well, because I mean, obviously, you know this, you're in a band and you are no slouches. You guys have been around a little while. The loudest voices are the negative ones. So if the positive is drowning them out, things are going right.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, there's always going to be, not even negative, but like people who don't get it. And we expect more people to not get it and just be like, what is this? This is just crazy. But or the other, because obviously the hardest thing for people who listen to it or do whatever it is trying to pigeonhole it, because it doesn't really fit into anything. So, you know, it gets pushed towards like the doom and sludge side of things, and then you get people who are like that kind of music going, this isn't doom, and then it gets pushed the other way towards prog, and then you've got prog elitists saying, well, no, this isn't prog, and it's like, well, no, it's somewhere in between, and it's a mash of all of it. But we've all got ridiculously varied music tastes, and I think that is what comes across in the music really. Like it's just a mishmash of everybody's tastes.
I think if you're someone like new discovering the album and so on, a lot of that can apply. If you are a long-term Boss Keloid fan, you should be by now expecting the unexpected. Like you should be prepared for something. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if your next record was a neo-punk thing. You know, it would not surprise at all.
No, it's I mean, and that's never the plan as such, to, you know, keep people guessing and how far can we push things. It's always just been, we want to better the last thing from a personal point of view. And like even with this, like we never wanted it to be Melted on the Inch 2. It was, no, we didn't want to remake that, but also, you know, that is the sound of that is the fundamental sound, and there are obviously elements of that on this as well, but so we wanted to obviously include that, but not just regurgitate that album again in a sort of slightly different format.
Very few bands can continue to do the same record over and over again, and a lot of them are now either retired, gone themselves anyway. These days, variety is key, while obviously still sounding very much like yourselves. You sound like Boss Keloid. This is a Boss Keloid record. There is no question about that. I think I urge everyone to go check themselves and then spend a week with it and then see how you feel at the end of that week. So you talked a bit before about like the build and leading towards the album and stuff like that. Now, obviously considering what you've done in previous records and how different it's been this time, what benefits have you been able to find when it came to the press and leading towards the release of your singles and the build towards the album? What benefits have you been able to take out of that because of COVID and so on?
Yeah, I mean, like probably more of the benefits were around the writing and recording aspect anyway, because we have a tendency, no matter how many times we say we're not going to do it, we do it every single time. But we end up booking like a one-off gig, either right before recording or in the middle of writing or something. And then, you know, we'll have gone months where we've not played any of the older stuff. So you need to relearn that, but then you need to relearn that in the middle of a writing cycle. And then it throws all that out. And no, every single time, like, no, not doing that. We'll do it every single time. And again, so, you know, sometimes it is sort of beneficial just to even spend, you know, a couple of hours away from those songs to play the older ones. And then you come back to these with fresh ears and a fresh head, and you end up doing something entirely different anyway. But being able to sort of spend more time focusing on writing and getting everything right for the studio was a sort of a major benefit. And then, like, again, same with sort of focusing on the press side of things, like it gave us the chance to just focus on that a little bit, and actually, because we're not the most proactive when it comes to like social media and things like that. And we know we're not, you know, I mean, like there's other bands that are well on their social game compared to us, and like, you know, it's it's something that we know we need to work on, but for even just from like the band account kind of thing, because as individuals, we're not necessarily all on social media, so we don't really post stuff from individual accounts that much. So, but yeah, even just by not being out and about and touring and gigging, it's allowed us to spend a bit more time on that and just try and generate a bit more buzz leading up to it. And like I say, it definitely seems to have had, you know, a big impact, because the reach that it's had so far has just been
phenomenal,
insane. Yeah, it's been crazy.
Was there anything that kind of happened during even the writing and recording and the build and up to the release that you were forced to do because of the pandemic that you thought, yeah, that really worked nicely for us, would maybe consider doing that in the future?
I mean, we weren't really sort of forced by the pandemic as such, because I say the main issue with that was just literally not being able to be in the room with each other. And I mean, going back to like older albums, it would be mainly like Paul and Steve who would write everything, and then we'd all go away and put our own parts to it and come back, turn it into a song. Whereas particularly this one, from start to finish, the entire thing has just been turn up into a practice room, sit down, see what happens. And that's how every song was written. So again, to be doing that for the first time and then have to step away from it, because you can't then, I mean, obviously you could try and put things together at home and send it to each other, but it's that crazy at times when it's just an individual part. You just think, oh, well, what am I supposed to do with this and what's going on? So like, yeah, it was definitely, but like I say, the writing collaboratively like that was completely different for us. But again, I think sort of like you said before, it still sounds like the Boss Keloid album, but it is different, and it's because of everybody else's sort of little flavorings that they're throwing in of their music taste sort of come through just subtly, just to sort of color it a little bit.
It's fascinating here because it sounds like you guys have kind of evolved so much in regards to how you're working together as well during a time when arguably evolution of bands have all had to take a step back.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think if even, you know, between us all, we all sort of had more technology available. So, you know, we could have done, you know, higher quality recordings at home that you could then send to each other. And, you know, I think we might have been able to do things a little bit differently, of at least getting ideas sent through. But like even now when we write in the practice room, once there's a riff or a section recorded, someone will just get out the phone and record a voice memo in the corner, and that's like the demo version of it. So we're not exactly in the high-tech realm when it comes to recording stuff.
It's natural. It sounds awesome. You know? One of the sort of highlights, one of the things that kind of comes up throughout the album is obviously it is a very positive record. It's got a lot of positive themes and lyrical content and what you're kind of trying to tell throughout it. Now, first off, you could did you plan, or were you thinking about the current state of the world when you kind of decided that's how you wanted to write the album, or at least the parts of the album, the direction you might have been going in?
Not really, because it's sort of, we've been writing it for about 3 years on and off. Like it's only sort of within the last 12 months or so it got really intense, because again we knew, right, well, we need to get this recorded, we really need to focus on it. But yeah, it's been sort of 3 years in the making, and the theme all along was always meant to be about, you know, the sense of community and doing things for the greater good and just general positive vibes. But yeah, then with COVID and, you know, all the things that have happened over the last 12 to 18 months, it's almost like the positivity on the album has just transformed into an entirely different beast of its own thing, and it's just sort of gone off on one. So like it definitely seems to be almost like a bit of an escape or a remedy for the way that the world is at the minute, which again, whether it's coincidence or, you know, we've been very lucky of the time. Because I say, if it would have been none of this, we'd have potentially rushed into the studio in May 2020 and it could have been an entirely different album. So it's almost like the irony of, for us at least anyway, of just a terrible worldwide situation has actually meant that we've, you know, made this album that seems to fit quite well as like a contrast to what's going on in the world.
Yeah, without meaning to, you may have accidentally captured a moment that in 20 years time, you'll be able to look back on and narrow it down to specifically, oh yeah, that was what was happening right there and then. And you can feel it even now, 20 years later, listening to that record and get that same feeling.
Yeah. And I mean, again, Alex may well have sort of channeled some of, you know, his more recent feelings of, oh, say over the last 12 months to write some of the lyrics. But yeah, 100%, you know, it's like you say, it's almost like we'll know from a personal point of view that was written and recorded throughout this period in time. And, you know, for most people, it's obviously going to be a very dark period, but it's almost like we can take something positive out of it.
That's the hope, right? Isn't it? I mean, it really is that if there's a handful of people, one person out there who's in a particularly dark or cold place and hears the record and it helps them, I mean, that's the dream, right?
100%. If, you know, I mean, if there's someone who's in that kind of a situation or in that kind of a place, and just one of those songs or any of it just sort of either keeps them going or drags them out of it, and it's just, like I say, it is the dream to think that music is doing, or sort of your music is doing that for other people. It's just insane. Like, it'd be amazing if it is helping people in that way.
Yeah, I really hope so, particularly as more weeks go by and more people hear it and get to know it. Well, let's change tactics then, because you're a bit of a gamer, right?
Yes, certainly am.
Here's the thing: when you do this whole, right, you're a gamer, I'm a gamer, how do you start a conversation off about video games? You start with things like, what's your favorite video game? What console do you play? And stuff like that. And it will be, I'd imagine, some of the answers may be quite obvious, maybe not. So rather than do that, let's just go to the very beginning. And really, it's about your childhood, because ultimately that's likely where you first picked up a controller. And I kind of want to know what your earliest memories are experience-wise for what you were playing, and what was the bug that bit back then?
So sort of both of, I've got two older brothers. So my oldest brother's like 9 years older than me, and my other brother's 7 years older than me. So they had a Commodore Amiga.
Oh, of course.
So that was just always set up. So that was just like the go-to. And yeah, you know, platform games like James Pond, Manic Miner, Golden Axe, and stuff, you know, just like stuff like, especially like Golden Axe, you could have two players. So I would be playing with my brother, and, you know, just that idea of just being able to sit there and play games with them was always sort of enjoyable. And then not long after the Amiga 500, there was another console that was kicking about that I don't think it did too well, actually, but it was called the Amiga CD32.
Of course.
So yeah, stuff like that. I had like games like Diggers and Brutal Football, which was just hilarious. Like, if you got in, it was American football, but if you ended up in injury time, the goal was to decapitate all the players on the other team, and that was how you won in injury time. It was just a genius game that, you know, they don't make them like that anymore.
Really don't.
But yeah, like, then sort of as I got a little bit older, then it was moving into sort of the world of consoles and stuff like that. So I think that's when it really, really bit. So I think I was around 5 or 6, and I got the SNES, Super Nintendo, and like sort of from that point, that was that. You know, games like Mario Kart, Donkey Kong, Super Tennis, NBA Jam, or sort of arcade games that suddenly turned up on a console, like Street Fighter 2 was there as well. And it's like, all of a sudden, you don't have to have a big arcade machine somewhere. You can play a game like Street Fighter on a console. So yeah, and then like, I used to spend a lot of time with my cousins and things like that when we were younger, and they had a SNES. So then you've now got someone to swap games with, and you know, you get into that world of, you know, oh yeah, you borrow this, and it, like, that in itself is just a whole other world. But I mean, yeah, not long after that, it was, you know, like N64, and that was just another level. Being able to play like 4 players in the same room without having to buy additional hardware or anything. As long as you all had a controller and you brought it around to someone's house, that was it. And it's like 4 of us can play a game, and it's like it, and obviously that then brings in more of a social aspect to it, because it's all well and good having 2 players, but all of a sudden, rather than people sitting and waiting and passing a controller around, there's 4 of you in a room all playing at once. And yeah, so I said sort of it was from like Commodore consoles and then the sort of first home computers that they brought out, to then just sort of moving into the world of Nintendo, and then saying just opened a whole new realm to me.
That is fascinating, because I'm listening to you. I've got a rough idea of what age you are based upon what you've said, a rough idea, and I'm just waiting for you to hit, as you've hit the 90s and you're talking Nintendo 64. I'm like, well, obviously you had a PlayStation, but you didn't say it.
No, well, my brother got a PlayStation as I got my Nintendo 64, so it was sort of like we did sort of play on each other's consoles a little bit, but he was always very quick to poo-poo the N64 and be like, oh, it doesn't look as good as this. You know, he had Tekken, Crash Bandicoot, Porsche Challenge, all you know, the sort of launch titles for the PlayStation. So we did have one, but it wasn't my console, so I can't sort of claim ownership for it. But then from that, after that, you know, that was when I did move into the Sony realm, and I then worked my way through PS2, PS3, PS4. And that's I sort of sidestepped away from, but I say sidestepped away from Nintendo. I didn't. I carried on getting like GameCube, Wii.
I was about to ask. Carry on with that path.
Yeah. So
Wii U.
the Wii U. Yes, I did have the Wii U.
Someone had to buy it, right?
Yeah. But I sort of kept the Nintendo tradition going because I love the titles that obviously are exclusive. Mainly Zelda. Like I literally live for Zelda games. They're absolutely incredible. I think that was one of the reasons that I bought the Wii U, because at the time, I don't think it had a name actually, but they released a concept trailer of what a Zelda game could look like on the Wii U, because it was the first HD console that they'd done. And I think it was like Link fighting a giant spider or something. And it looked incredible. And I was like, right, that'll do. I'll get, Zelda mug. That was well placed.
That was not on purpose. Exact mug.
But yeah, so I sort of, that's when I then got thinking, oh yeah, brilliant, I'll wait for the HD Zelda game to come out. And then obviously they remastered some, but then Breath of the Wild then got pushed and pushed and pushed so much that it did come out on the Wii U, but it obviously became the launch title for the Switch. So but yeah, again, that was a console that I think other third-party developers didn't take enough of an advantage of it, so it just sort of bombed massively, because that gamepad could have been really useful, you know, with like the dual screens and stuff. But Nintendo sort of gone off into their own sort of world anyway, haven't they, since the Wii?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I followed a very similar path to you. Up until the GameCube, I thought Nintendo could do no wrong, but I very, very heavily disliked the Wii. I particularly disliked its marketing and how what they were trying to move to. However, success says otherwise. It's good God.
It's one of them things where I think they even sort of said themselves that they were trying to step away from the hardcore gamers in inverted commas, and they wanted it to be more of a family thing. So it was always very cartoony games that were, you know, easy to play. And so they said, well, we don't want to compete with Sony and Microsoft anymore. We've got our own little market.
Yeah.
And I think it obviously did speak for itself when Xbox then came out with the Kinect and PlayStation came out with Play or whatever it was with the iToy and the little. It's like you're just making Wii controllers. But yeah, so I think sort of when Nintendo realized that they could go off and do that, like as upsetting as it was, like for the likes of say myself who loved Zelda and the more challenging games that they would put out, they said they found their own success and they didn't need to compete with the other companies anymore.
Considering that as well, like, so I mean, I have to ask this question just really to kind of throw it out there. And I know it's when people go, what? I happen to think the Nintendo Switch is the best modern console of all of them, like over PS and Microsoft and all, even though I have those as well. It's what got me back in the Nintendo games. after being off that train for so long. Do you have strong feelings about the Switch? Is it something you quite enjoy?
Yeah, I've got a Switch. I didn't get it on launch. I think, as with most consoles, you struggle to get anything on launch these days. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting concept, and the fact that they started releasing some of the like massive third-party games like Skyrim, Witcher 3, and it's just like, well, now when I'm on the train or if I'm on a flight somewhere, I can sit and play Skyrim for like 5 hours. It's just like, that's never been a possibility before. And then you've got Breath of the Wild and other Nintendo games, and they've still kept to that sort of not arcadey aspect, but the ability to play with other people there. And then you don't even need another set of like Joy-Cons. All right, yeah, you can detach them and you can play with two anyway, but because it's touchscreen as well, there's still like, you can almost play like board games on it and stuff as well, can't you? So it's very unique and say innovative, and again, Nintendo just sort of showing what they can do. They've probably been working on that for years and kept that under their hats, and then all of a sudden unveiled this console that can be portable, but then also in HD on a TV with just a simple dock. It is because the light I've never really sort of seen the point of, because it isn't much cheaper.
Of course.
And you then don't have the ability to put it on a TV. So if you were going to spend the amount on a Switch Lite, I don't know why you wouldn't spend like the extra 30 quid and get a Switch.
Yeah, and if you really want a good kind of Nintendo handheld, let's just get a 2DS then. Perfectly good for that sort of thing. Right, I'm gonna throw in something I didn't tell you about before. I just want to. We're gonna go. So you're talking about consoles you've grown up with. So I'm just gonna go through the ones that I can remember of a certain period now, and off the top of your head, first thing that comes into your mind. Tell me what either your favorite game was on it or the one that holds the strongest memories. So let's begin with the SNES.
Probably Donkey Kong Country, the first one.
Wow. I'll be honest, I was expecting one Mario game, so that's a real surprise.
Yeah. No, again, going back to obviously mentioning my cousins, they had Super Mario World, which is the main Mario one that everyone remembers. So I did sort of borrow that off them and play that. But yeah, the first Donkey Kong, like, everything about it is, as far as platform games go, like it is brilliant, but the music in it was just incredible. And even now you listen back to some of it and it's like, yeah, it's like 8-bit, like hilarious music, but like it's brilliant. And like the nostalgia, as soon as that sort of kicks in, every time you think, oh yeah.
As a youngster, considering that game, did the minecart bit
minecart is honestly, I get, because again, that had like the co-op element where one of you could play as Donkey Kong, one could play as Diddy Kong. So again, playing with my brothers and stuff like that. But yeah, like the frustration of like the minecart levels, and like I said, I'm a little bit of a completionist for like sort of most games, and then trying to get the Kong letters on every level and all of that. And so even when you finish a level, you're annoyed because you've not got all the Kong letters, so you want to go back and do it again, but you've spent 2 hours trying to clear a bloody minecart level. So but yeah, that was one of the hardest things I can ever remember doing on a game. There was one time, I can't remember which level it was, but like quite a few of my brother's friends were around, and it was a case of you just kept passing the controller around, and if you died, you passed it on.
Of course.
But there was one level, I guess, can't remember what it was, but for hours we've been trying to complete it, got through it. Everyone sort of jumped up in celebration, but my brother's friend still had the controller in his hand, which then sort of yanked the console off the unit and then like sort of made it freeze.
Oh.
So we had to like restart it, but it hadn't saved because it hadn't quite finished the level. So we had to do it again.
Oh.
So that's probably one of my most vivid Donkey Kong memories.
That's incredible. And no doubt someone said, look, we did it once, we can do it again.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't think it took much longer, but it was like second or third attempt after trying again. So I think it's the psychological aspect of, oh, well, I've done it, I know I can do it.
You made a reference before when you talked about music and you talked about someone's leaving something and coming back away from it. Surely you've had the same experience in video games. You get stuck on something, you leave it for a day, come back and you do it in one.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just because you can just feel the frustration building up, and you realize it when you get like less and less of the way through it. You're getting further and further back every time you try it. So you're just like, right. But it takes a long time to get to that point. You still keep trying and hammering away at it until you literally just can't take it anymore. And it's either going to be, I'm either going to break that or break something else. So I need to turn it off.
Tell me about it. All right, let's carry on. What about Mega Drive or Genesis for our American friends?
Again, I didn't have too much involvement with Sega because I was a Nintendo boy. But yeah, again, like Golden Axe sort of crossed over into that realm. Streets of Rage, sort of those kind of games. Obviously Sonic, but that's sort of too easy of a go-to. But
it's almost like if you reach this age and you hadn't played Sonic, even if you've never played a game before, you know, I think there's probably people living deep in an Amazon jungle playing Sonic the Hedgehog at some point.
Yeah. But yeah, even like they did sort of cool little things of the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge that was like separate. So then you could play Sonic 1, 2, or 3 within that Sonic and Knuckles. Yeah. So you could then go back and play those games, but as Knuckles, for example. So like stuff like that. When you think back, that's ahead of its time. You know, being able to stack cartridges like that and introduce a whole new element to a game in like the early to mid 90s, that's just crazy.
What was it called? Oh, I remember being absolutely blown away by the expansion pack that you could use with the Nintendo 64.
I think that came with Donkey Kong 64 because it needed it to run it. And then because again, you just always, it had a little slot on the front of it and you're like, what the hell is this for? I don't understand. Because there was something else on the bottom of it that I think only released in Japan called like the DD4 or something.
Oh yeah, that's right. It went underneath, right? And
but I don't think it ever like launched in Europe or even North America. Like I think it was purely like Japan, and to this day I don't really know what it was for. I don't know what it did, or whether it played different games, or I can't remember what benefit it added to the console. But yeah, it just sort of seemed to never make its way over it.
Yeah, it won't be the first time Nintendo did that. Okay, what about then? Right, so you're not really Sega. Did you have any involvement with the Saturn?
There was one game. I've somehow, and I know it isn't because this was on the N64, but it was a bit like Turok because it was like a dinosaur game. It might have even been Jurassic Park. I can't remember, but I think that was on the Sega Saturn. Yeah,
it's not got like a big catalogue of games really.
No. I suppose a bit like the Dreamcast that sort of didn't do much, did it? Unfortunately.
Let's combine the two then. Considering there's so few games and such short-lived consoles, and you may not have a history of them. Then the Sega Saturn and the Sega Dreamcast. What one out of all of those two jumps out memory-wise?
Again, I think there was a Sonic game that I remember playing a lot on that.
Sonic Adventure.
I think it was Sonic Adventure because obviously the Dreamcast had the little screen in the middle of the controller as well, didn't it? That sort of just had like Sonic's face on it or whatever when you were playing
EMU.
That. I think there was like, what was the other one that had like launched with it? It was like Sega Bass Fishing or something like that. I think that launched with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, sort of weirdly, any memories of playing on like the Dreamcast and stuff were in the cinema because they used to have like they had like listening stations for like CDs, like HMV used to have. So they were in the cinema where there'd be like a certain album on and you just put the headphones on and sit and listen to them. But then at the side of that, for whatever reason, they had a Dreamcast. Like, it was so random. Yeah. But yeah, so you'd either, before watching a film or after you've watched a film, just come out and stand and play Sonic for like half an hour, 45 minutes, and then go home.
Never ever seen or heard of a cinema doing that. Must be something up north only.
I think because it was at the time it was a Virgin cinema, so I imagine the music will have been like Virgin Megastores kind of thing, so that's why that was there. But I don't know why there was a console there.
Okay, well then let's do the big one then. Nintendo 64. Now this has got to be really hard, right? Because there are so many.
Yeah, but it's sort of initial immediate answers. There's two standouts that I imagine would be anybody's standouts that's got an N64. GoldenEye has to be there.
Of course.
And Ocarina of Time.
It was, if it wasn't Ocarina, it was going to be the other one.
Majora's Mask. But yeah, I mean, like, first 3D Zelda title, so you weren't just sort of side scrolling and moving around, you were actually in a 3D world that was just unlike anything else ever at that time. Yeah, like going back to the whole 4-player thing in the same room, like GoldenEye was the first sort of 4-player first-person shooter. I think that sort of paved the way for pretty much every other first-person shooter game that came after it. Of, oh yeah, well, we can have these 4-player death matches and we can do all these things, and you know, throw like fun scenarios on of, you know, no weapons and like one-shot kill and all these other things, and like teams. You know, it's like Man with the Golden Gun was probably one of the greatest modes on GoldenEye. It was so funny.
It's a cool way to fall out with friends.
Yeah, it is. Especially when you played it that much and on every map that you knew exactly where the Golden Gun spawned. So it was just impossible to get it off you. Because again, at the time, no one really had the logic of, well, let's team up, because if 3 of us shoot them, can't take us all out.
Yeah.
You didn't. You all just ran around crazily trying to gun everybody down. So tactics didn't exist at that point in sort of my thinking, at least, anyway.
So when going back to the love of Donkey Kong Country earlier on, what was your feelings then when it moved to 3D on the N64? Did you enjoy that? Because I struggled.
I struggled massively. I think suddenly, because it's always been a traditional platform, even the same with like Mario 64 was not as hard as Donkey Kong 64, weirdly, but to suddenly take like a side-scrolling platform game and put it into a 3D environment where you're not suddenly just looking for certain things that you can jump on or swing off of or throw things at. You've got to look for whole other ways to get through levels.
Yeah,
it was almost like a big step up in difficulty. I really struggled because there was like games like Banjo-Kazooie and stuff like that as well, but they weren't quite as bad because you weren't going into that expecting like a Donkey Kong game or a Mario game. It was just, oh well, this is going to be like a 3D kind of platformer, and it was fine. But thinking that you know what you're going to expect when you've played a lot of Mario and Donkey Kong and stuff, to have to go into a 3D version of it is a little bit like it's a whole of a sort of world in it. It's not easy,
especially when you take into account the genius design of the Nintendo 64 controller. I mean,
again, it's probably one of the biggest arguments I remember people having growing up, especially compared to like the PlayStation. But it's like, yeah, but it's got everything that you're going to need. It's got an analog stick, it's got a D-pad, and it's got a whole host of other buttons on the right-hand side. So like it's got everything that you're going to need. But I must admit, it was one of the funniest things ever to hand it to someone who'd never played on it before and just watch them try and figure out, like, how am I supposed to hold this? And you wouldn't tell them, you just sort of hand it to them and go, all right, let's see what they do. And yeah, the sort of configurations that people used to do with it were funny.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting because obviously they would end up improving upon the controller when it came to the GameCube, which I'll be interested. All right, no, right. What is it then for the GameCube for you?
Game?
Yeah.
Again, it's difficult only because I'd probably pick this for the next 2 or 3 Nintendo consoles, but Twilight Princess. Zelda.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah. Again, I don't know whether it's because it was such a massive step up from the likes of like Majora's Mask, or whether to suddenly see Twilight Princess on that. But I mean, Twilight Princess is probably hands down my favorite Zelda game, which again is quite a controversial choice. But I just love the style of it and the story and everything in that was just because if there's one thing that Zelda games have always got, it's always a good story, as long as you sort of are into that kind of thing, because they're always obviously based on the same concept of the main 3 people of Zelda, Ganon and Link. But that obviously introduced Midna and this whole other sort of world of the Twilight realm and stuff. And yeah, I mean, obviously there was a Star Wars game that I had on the GameCube as well.
Oh, something like Rogue Squadron?
I don't think it was. It was a bit more, because it was like the Jedi Knight ones that used to be on like PC and stuff, but it wasn't that, and I can't think what it was now.
I think
I really can't remember. Well, that was good.
Yeah, good.
And then obviously things like Luigi's Mansion, that was when that sort of first, because again, that's turned up in various forms since, hasn't it? But yeah, that got its first outing on GameCube as well. But yeah,
title.
Probably Twilight Princess, I think.
Awesome.
What would you have gone for GameCube then? Because I know you're obviously a big fan of the GameCube.
Well, Palm, I mean, I love I love Wind Waker, but not enough to rank it. Oh man, Oh, you know, my mind's gone blank. I'm like Super Mario Sunshine. I'm like, no, I love Super Mario Sunshine, but not the best game.
It's not the best game on it.
No, not at all. Oh, of course. No, I do have it, and it's technically a little bit of a cheat. It's the Resident Evil not HD, Resident Evil remake they did at the time.
Yeah.
Blew my mind.
Fair enough. That's a good shout.
Yeah.
Because they were sort of amazing anyway, but then to sort of reboot it and
couldn't believe it.
Really, I'll give you that.
Yeah, nowadays when you see like, oh yeah, we're re-releasing this game and we've made it from the ground up and all that kind of thing, and you end up looking and going, have you really? Really HD?
Yeah, you've not done much.
Yeah. So after that point, then did you kind of stick with Sony all the way up to kind of now, or do you range between all the basically between Microsoft and Sony?
It was mainly, other than the brief like forays into the Nintendo realm, because I did get the Wii and the Wii U and then the Switch, with a couple of like, I didn't get the 3DS, but I just got the normal, like just the standard DS when that first came out. It was mainly Sony. That's like PlayStation was where I did the bulk of console gaming then after that. So working up through PS2, PS3, PS4, pretty much up until September last year, where like a bunch of us who played on PlayStation built PCs. And like since making that switch, that has literally blown my mind. The world of PC gaming, just the variety on offer and the things that are on like Steam that third-party developers make that, you know, would probably never see the light of day on console, but are just so fun and things like that. But yeah, for a good 2 or 3 years, I just like lived on the PS4. It was like an amazing console.
So now you're part of the master race, huh?
Well, it's like I say, it's just a whole other world that I don't think I ever anticipated. I don't know whether part of me didn't want to do it sooner because I was like, oh, it's just going to take over everything. It's going to be too good. Or whether I was like, nah, it can't be. Everyone bangs on about it all the time. And I don't know whether I was in denial or scared of how much it was going to just take over my life.
I wonder as well, for a lot of people, like there's something quite overwhelming because of the amount of range of if you're going to buy a great gaming computer outright, or if you want to do your own build and all that, if you're not good at that, but you like to play games, I feel like that, I mean, for me personally, I don't PC game, and the thought of doing that is very overwhelming. Like, how'd you get started?
Well, I mean, I must say, when you said then, I'm massively fortunate that Matt, who used to play keyboard in the band, him and his brother David are like mad into PC gaming, and they sort of grew up on it. So they were one of the reasons why I sort of made the jump as well, because between us three and our other friend Colin, like we were like the four that always played stuff. So as soon as, you know, a couple of people plant the seed of, oh, we're thinking about building PCs, it's like, well, I'm probably going to have to then, otherwise I'm going to get left behind.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've sort of grown up with it, so they sort of just know everything. They knew everything. They basically picked all the components of what they were going to build, passed that to me, and was like, look, this is what we're going to get. This is like the sort of price range that you're looking at. we can swap a few things out to make it a bit cheaper, or you could step it up if you wanted to. But like, yeah, if I'd have had to come into this blind, I literally wouldn't have known where to start, because I think you can obviously buy pre-built rigs, but for the money that you could spend doing a custom build, it wouldn't be as good. It's almost like not taking advantage, but they're like, oh well, we can sell you this built unit that you can plug in and play for X amount, but if you went away and put all your own components together yourself, you could probably build either the equivalent for cheaper or build something better for the same amount of money that builds cost. So yeah, I'm massively fortunate that I had friends who knew all about it, because there's no way I would have been able to do it on my own. Even putting it together is just a whole other ball game.
Yeah. When I see people cracking out soldering irons, I'm thinking like, okay, this is not what I need to be doing.
Luckily, I didn't have to do any of that. But yeah, no, if I hadn't have had sort of that kind of help and support behind me, there's no way I would have ever done it.
If there's one thing I hope people have picked up already up to this point, is that the word community, I think, comes up quite a lot in regards to why you game to a certain degree, either then or now, be it with family and back then and friends now. You would have gone through your life, like most of us did when we reached a certain age, being told to grow up, right? Games are for kids, man. What you doing?
Yep.
That kind of thing. What kind of got you over those humps? And what is it? Is it the community aspect that's kept you connected to playing games? Or is there something more to that?
I think now, because again, I don't really know when this happened, but
yeah,
I would be sit and play a single player story driven game on my own for hours. I still can, don't get me wrong, but now just the idea of, let's say, just getting in from work and you've got a couple of hours to kill in the evening or whatever, jump online, see what's going on, like a few of your friends are around, it's like, oh well, I'll jump in and play what they're playing or whatever. And it's like, it's just another way of socializing that, again, like, not to sort of talk about the pandemic too much, but for people who couldn't go out and socialize and see the friends, and where perhaps phone calls or video calls and stuff weren't cutting it, we were still socializing in exactly the same way that we always did. It's another sort of just outlet and another way to communicate with people. So as well as it, like you say, it being, oh well, you play computer games when you're a kid, but you need to go to work and you need to do all these things. It's like, if anything, since I've had my own money, I've been able to spend more of it on gaming and sort of invest more in it and sort of get more enjoyment out of it. But it's also the fact that I think at one point, and it was probably true at one point, but the social view of it was that it's a very antisocial experience, and you're locked away in a room on your own, not talking to anybody, and you're just going to sit and play games all day. And it's like, it's actually now the sort of complete opposite if you want it to be. It's one of the most social aspects. Like, look at things like Twitch, where people sort of create an entire community that they interact with every single day. Where the same people will keep coming back, whether it's because they like the games that they play, whether it's they like that person's personality. There's a whole host of things, and it's like, it's not an antisocial thing at all. And it doesn't just have to be people locked away in bedrooms or whatever, not talking to people. It's a whole other way of socializing that, yeah, all right, you've not got that same element of human contact if you were meeting up in a pub or a restaurant, but it still gives you that chance to interact with friends. But then likewise, depending on the games and whatever else, you can end up speaking to complete random strangers and have some of the sort of funniest games and amazing conversations that you'd never have outside. I've played games with, as I'm sure you have, with people in like America or Canada or wherever, and it's like, I'd have never had a conversation with this person out in the street.
So your best friends in this game when you're on the same team. Yeah,
it's just, I can, to a point, I can see why people either don't understand it or don't get into it. But I think, I guess it's not as bad now, thankfully, but where once upon a time, like, people were so quick to dismiss it of, nah, they say it's childish, it's you're just antisocial. It's like, it's just none of those things at all. But yeah, like the gaming community element of it is definitely something that sort of has drawn me in more recent times. But Yeah, even just like the caliber of games now, and as technology improves, like the stuff that's being released, and some of them are, they're like films and TV programs, and they then draw you in because the stories are so rich, and they get these incredible actors that aren't just voice actors, it's all motion capture, so they're acting out scenes that are then in the games and stuff. And it's like, I think a lot of people would probably enjoy sitting watching other people play games because they might not like, oh, well, I don't want to control anything, that seems too technical, but they'd enjoy the story and
watching, your experience.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. Have you by chance played the Mafia Definitive Editions that came out a couple of months ago?
I've not, no.
Right, I'd left it, and I started playing the first one a few weeks ago. And I played Mafia back in when it came out, like 2008 or 2009 originally. So I was like, well, it's been a decade, let me play it again. And I drove my wife nuts, constantly going, look how amazing their faces are. Why do they look so real? It's freaking me out,
Yeah. It's the fact that, and like I say, that's a remaster, but that's a remaster done well. But yeah, it's absolutely insane. The sort of minute detail of just people's expressions in certain cutscenes, and you can tell what they're thinking, just like you think back to sort of the square, sort of boxy characters, even 10 years ago, you don't think it was that bad until you compare modern graphics to 10 years ago. And you're like, this was one of the best things I'd ever seen 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And now it's laughable. It just doesn't stack up to anything. It's crazy.
I briefly put the remastering of Final Fantasy VIII on a few weeks back, and I was just like, oh wow, I can finally see Squall's face. That's what they wanted him to look like. Good for them.
Again, they're a prime example of it because of sort of how old they were, and looking at some of the Final Fantasy games now and the more recent ones, it's night and day.
Absolutely, it is. Not just, let's move on from the visual side of things then. I really like to talk to people about what their emotional connections are, not necessarily to the childhood aspect, but even more modern as well, be it a particular story or a character or an arc or just a game overall that you can think of, or moments that affected you emotionally in the same way that other media might, be it a book, a film, a piece of music, and so on. Is there anything like that for you?
I think anyone who's played The Last of Us,
of course,
will just know what an emotional roller coaster that is. Just like even from the start, and it's things that you don't even pick up on. Like I don't know if you've listened to the official podcast that they released for The Last of Us.
No,
but it's very good. The first sort of half of it is all about the first game, and then the second one was all about the second half is all about the development and stuff of Last of Us 2. But it's the level of detail that you just don't comprehend as like a player. Like as an example, in the first game, the very, very first thing that you do is start off controlling Joel's daughter with nobody else in the house. That was done purposely to immediately make you feel on edge of, well, I'm a little kid and I'm in my house all alone and I don't know where anybody is. And you do feel massively uneasy.
Of course, yeah.
Just playing that. And then obviously there's all that stuff that happens in the opening scene of him like smashing through the door and everything else because the neighbours turn him into a zombie. And it's just like, at the time you don't take any of it in, but listening to them describe it and the way they wrote it and stuff, you just like, nothing's done by accident. Like it's all very, very well thought out. But yeah, just the relationship between all the different characters in that game, but obviously like between Joel and Ellie all the way through it, of him, obviously not really wanting anything to do with her and seeing her as a burden, but then all of a sudden cares for her more than anything else in the world, and he just wants to look after her.
Yeah, it's very real.
Yeah, massively. So yeah, that's sort of a standout. There's I don't know if you played many of the like Quantic Dream games, like Detroit Become Human, where they're almost like interactive films?
No, I've not. I played games similar, but not that one. No.
Yeah, because obviously there was things like Heavy Rain,
Of course, Heavy Rain. Yeah, that's
Until Dawn, all those kind of things, where it's more like an interactive film. The amount of sort of controller skill required is very minimal.
Yeah.
But yeah, from like a story point of view, and obviously interactive, and you can change the story the more you play through it. But Detroit is, to sort of try and sum it up, there's 3 different storylines that go on, because there's 3 main characters. But the sort of the lead storyline all the way through it is it's about androids and living in a human world of androids. But it's essentially about trying to gain rights for androids. And like it raises questions like, what is it that makes you human? Is it the fact that you do have biological organs and everything else? Or is it these emotions that you can feel? And are their emotions real or not? Because it's still affecting them in the same way. Their brain is still electrical. And it's like they argue that they're still capable of love and anger and hate and all these other things. And, you know, they don't want to be subservient. They just want to be viewed as another race. Like they don't want to sort of be sort of dominated, or they don't want to take over anything. They just want to be viewed as equal. And like just that as a concept blew my mind. But again, the storytelling in it and the way it's done, it's amazing. It's brilliant.
Yeah, even you describing it there, you know, the parallels to real life and, you know, issues that we have in real world issues, and then comparing it to say something like Blade Runner or AI, artificial intelligence, the Steven Spielberg movie, you can see the power ideas are kind of drawn from that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's why it's good, because it's not the stereotypical sci-fi take of, oh, we've managed to create an AI, oh, it wants to take over everything, it wants to kill everybody. It's like, well, no, we don't. We just want to be seen as equal to you. We don't want to do all your stuff for you. We just want to live our own lives in our own communities. And
yeah, we've had enough Terminator movies. We, you know, we can be wrong.
Yeah, but I mean, why people in the real world are still trying to create AIs when science fiction has told us just to leave it alone, but people insist on carrying on. So
Back to the Future told us we'd have flying cars by now. You know,
it did.
I'm not too worried about humanity creating an all-conquering AI.
No, to be fair, you're right there.
Yeah. So this is a list one. Imagine I am someone who's never played a game before, or at least I went back in the day and I was playing Super Mario Brothers on a Nintendo, and that was about it. And then I spent my teenage years drinking and doing all the stuff teenagers should do. I grew up, had kids, and now I'm bored of my life and I want to get distracted. And I come to you and say, listen, man, Liam, you play games. Give me 3 that I can kind of not just get me started, but the idea would be to keep me continuing and wanting to experience more. What 3 would you choose?
That's, I suppose, pretty hard, because you wouldn't want to overwhelm somebody. Because again, immediately your brain goes to something along the lines of Skyrim or Fallout or something that is massive.
Yeah.
Does sort of hold your hand a little bit at the start and tell you what you need to know, but then ultimately you're left to your own devices and you can play it how you want. Obviously, you're supposed to follow the quests and do things, but you could spend days just wandering around, exploring and talking to people. So obviously there's all those kind of things. Again, from like a sort of a fun and a social aspect, there's little arcadey games like Overcooked.
Okay, yeah, good shout.
Which again, you don't necessarily need to be online gaming or anything else. You've still got, people can be round, and again, with the benefits of modern consoles, you don't need wires and stuff traipsing everywhere. You can all have wireless controllers and sit there, and again, that doesn't sort of need much interaction with it, because there's literally like 2 buttons that you'll use and then the stick to move around. You don't need much, and the concept is relatively simple, but in terms of fun and drawing you in and letting you know why people do play games, and like I think something along those kind of lines would be pretty cool. And then again, something like Detroit or Heavy Rain or something where, again, it's control of light, but you get to sort of see modern graphics and see what is possible, but then you're drawn in by the storytelling and everything else. Because I mean, again, I don't know about yourself, but one of the main reasons why I do sort of play games so much, especially single player ones, is it's just escapism.
Yeah.
Isn't it? You know what I mean? It's like the world can be a pretty grim place at the best of times. What better way than sitting down and just going into a whole of a world of just literally not thinking about this world and doing something else? It's like the same, like you said before, it's the same as a good book, good TV program, like anything. It's to switch off and just get away from reality for a little bit. So
there's a reason why I'm coming home from work at the moment and playing Lego Harry Potter.
Yeah.
You know?
But again, all those Lego games are incredible because they're so funny as well. You know what I mean? It's
incredibly well-built games. Incredibly well-built games. It's Lego.
Yeah. But yeah, I had like some of the Star Wars ones and like it wasn't a Pirates of the Caribbean one, but it's like an All Stars one, but Jack Sparrow is in it. And it's very funny because he runs around like Jack Sparrow, but he's a Lego Jack Sparrow, and it's just hilarious.
We kind of can you touch upon Overcooked? I have to ask this then as well. Considering the wealth of gaming you do before and now, what about mobile gaming? And this is a really touchy subject for me personally, but I'm just intrigued by your answer. What about, do you do much in the way of mobile gaming?
Not much. I probably don't know much about it, to be honest. And what I do know, or what I have seen, should I say, is more everything's just like hidden behind paywalls and adverts, and like people do get massively addicted to it and end up just spending a fortune because you need to put a little bit, and it doesn't seem like a lot at the time because you're just putting little bits of money into it to unlock the next little bit that you need to do. But over the course of like 3 months, you check your bank statement or whatever, and you're like, oh, I've spent like a fortune on this bloody mobile game. Like, how's that happened?
Yeah, that suck.
But like, I mean, I must admit, like, I don't get it, but it's only because, like you were saying, then I'm aware of the wealth of gaming stuff that's available elsewhere. That my phone is my phone. I don't need to use it for that because I've got other stuff to play games. And again, I think if people stepped away from the sort of stigma of, oh, it's gaming, it's childish. If you were like, you literally sat on your phone playing games all the time, like you could probably play something that you would massively enjoy.
You're absolutely right. It is. I completely understand. I mean, without going too much into it, compared to what the free-to-play market, as it's known, is an absolute cesspit of hell.
Yeah.
These days more than ever before. But I always like to gauge people's opinions because outside the free-to-play market, the pay up front side of things, you can unearth and you have to search for it. Kind of imagine a bit like Steam, actually, where but when you find those games that are really like, and on a mobile game that you pay up front for, and there's no in-app purchase and all that, like that's where the joy for me comes from, that aspect. It's just really difficult to find them, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like I say, it is 100% sort of ignorance on my part. Like it's something that I don't know much about. But it just, even hearing you compare it to Steam and knowing that, you know, if you do know where to look, or if you know what you're looking for, you can probably find like an absolute gem that, you know, for the sake of £5-6 or whatever, you know, you could get untold amounts of enjoyment out of when you're out and about and you've not got your Switch with you, for example.
Yeah. With that in mind, then, is there something you can think of off the top of your head that's in your mind that you have found a hidden, like a £5-6, whatever it is, a gem on Steam that perhaps people may not know about, and you just think, my God, I wish people had heard of this or played it because, wow.
That is difficult because I mean, it's one of them things where even if I would potentially think no one knows about it, they probably do. Only because most of the things that I have discovered or come across have either been things that other people have passed to me, or I've seen people playing on Steam.
No, that's
Twitch, sorry. But yeah, things like Phasmophobia. I don't know if you've seen anything to do with that.
No.
It's still in early development, so it's not like a big game or anything, but it's essentially like a 4-player co-op, but you are ghost hunting. But all of the communication stuff that's in it is proximity based. So if you're not stood near each other, you can't hear each other.
What?
And you've got to like look for certain clues to try and identify what type of ghost it is that you're hunting. But like as more and more time goes on, you sort of like agitate the ghost and it starts sort of like fighting back and it can kill you. Like when it kills you, it is terrifying.
Okay, sounds quite clever.
And it's like there's the stereotypical like paranormal investigator stuff in it, so like talk boxes and things, but your in-game voice allows you to sort of communicate, so you can ask questions.
Oh wow.
And then if you're in the vicinity of the ghost, the talk box will like speak back to you and it will like pick it up and stuff.
Oh cool.
But like it is pretty terrifying, but again it's hilarious playing with like 3 of your friends.
That sounds very much like a big social thing.
Yeah, and you sort of all the movement is really slow, so you're sort of walking around the house really slowly. But then, as you sort of get closer and closer to a room, you'll just hear someone screaming because they're getting murdered or whatever. And that is very funny.
Yeah, that's kind of innovative, and it brings me to my next question then, which is modern gaming and innovation. We haven't really done anything spectacular since open worlds, maybe.
Yeah.
What was the last innovative thing that really impressed you? And twofold, what do you think the next thing might be?
In terms of like game development and stuff, there's not sort of, I was going to say there's not anything groundbreaking, but there's things like battle royales took over, didn't they? And that sort of became the main way that people played competitive gaming. Suddenly became all about battle royale. And you couldn't sort of run and gun the same way of, I'm going to respawn again in a minute, it's fine. Suddenly you had to be way more tactical and, and not sort of squander your life, because otherwise that was it. You were out, you had to start again.
Yeah.
But even like technology wise, it's things like VR's come on.
Okay.
Leaps and bounds. I've not had too much experience of VR or of the PlayStation 5 controllers, but I know like the responsive triggers that Sony have put on that is like something else. So there's more resistance on the triggers depending on what you're doing and what you're playing. So on certain games, it can be really hard to press the trigger if it's a trigger on a gun, for example, or an accelerator on a car or something else. Like there's almost like feedback to the triggers. But I've not really had much experience of it, so I don't know if it's brilliant or annoying, because that's one of them things that could just infuriate you when you just like, I just want to play the game. Why can't I press the triggers?
Yeah, why have you done this? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to ask though, when you before you carry on, we brought a VR. Do you think gimmicky, or do you think that's around for long term now?
Again, from what you see of other people doing it, it does seem very gimmicky. But I think with the right sort of environment with it and the right game and designed well enough, it could be used to be the next thing. And it's almost like to go back to that question of what could be next. I mean, it is obviously mega sci-fi stuff and pipe dreamy stuff, but I don't know if you've seen Ready Player One.
Yep.
Something like the Oasis, what I mean? It's could we end up in this thing where everything is virtual and you can go to different areas of one big virtual game to play different games, but essentially you're just in one big virtual reality thing. Obviously there's no way that's on the horizon anytime soon, but whether that could end up somewhere where it goes, because that film is brilliant. Even just forget about all the pop culture references, which just make it funny anyway when you sort of spot everything and pick it up. But I just love the concept of that film anyway. But yeah, something like that wouldn't surprise me in 100 years time or whatever it ends up being. But
that's in it. That's what I think. Yeah, you know what? It's not as far-fetched. It's probably not in our lifetime.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility. I mean, when it gets to the point where you're like flying around in a room and stuff on wires because you're playing a game, that's a little bit different. But just to be in virtual reality that is a bit more immersive than putting on a headset and then still sort of being very much aware that you're a person in a room with a headset on, as opposed to actually going into a game kind of thing. Because I think that's why I know a lot of people talk about like getting motion sickness and stuff when playing VR games, because it's just a bit disorientating and it's just too much going on for your brain to comprehend. But I think a part of it is still, you're very much aware that you are stood up in a room, so you can't ever really settle into it. And I've heard, I know a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm just dead conscious of thinking that there's someone behind me or someone's going to come in and try and scare me or do whatever." It's just like, you can't enjoy what you're doing for fear of bumping into something in your house or bumping into a person or whatever else. But like I said, I think if with the right game and the right environment, I think VR could end up being quite cool.
Yeah. So it's not. I think you're wrong at all. It's just so gimmicky. All I ever see is, oh look, jump scares and horror games.
100%. And Phasmophobia, like I mentioned before, that is on VR, and when you see people playing it, it's a whole other, like, it almost plays like a different game. It doesn't. It does just seem that then looks like a gimmicky game, whereas playing it without VR just seems more fun.
Yeah. It's funny though, isn't it? That's, I guess. Well, I guess what we'll see. We'll have to see on that. Right, this has already gone on way longer than we expected. So we are come to the end. Right, I wanted to ask you this, and I suspect I might know the answer, but let's see. Wipe your memory of one game. So we're not talking about, we were talking about playing it with fresh eyes and ears, effectively for the first time ever. Choose one game that you could just get rid of in your mind so you get to experience it all over again. What would you choose?
I don't think you'll guess this because I haven't mentioned it at all yet.
Oh, cool.
But Destiny.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And vanilla Destiny at that, before they did anything else to it. Purely because I had well over 1,000 hours on that game. It literally sort of, that is one of the first things in recent memory that stole my life from me. But again, I didn't really play much Xbox, so I had no experience of Halo or Bungie's world of gameplay or anything, so Destiny just blew my mind. But again, it was the sort of big introduction into the social aspect of gaming and 6-man raids and there being mechanics to boss fights and not just going around and shooting things because it's a first-person shooter. You had to work as a team and actually do stuff. And like, I met, some of my like most recent best friends through playing that game, and it's just so many funny memories and like the sort of joy of beating the Vault of Glass for the first time, of doing the first raid and completing it. It went from taking us about 4.5 hours when we first did it to we were like running it on hard mode in under 35 minutes after a few times. But yeah, like just that as it was back then. It's so funny when you try, people who've played like it towards the end of its life cycle or played Destiny 2 and you try to explain the way that the armor system worked and leveling up used to work in the original game, people just look at you like you're talking another language, even though they know the game. They're just like, what are you talking about? But there's just so many fond memories of that if there was anything that I could like just take away and do it again, it would be that.
See, that's what I love about these kind of conversations is my initial shock of being really Destiny, and especially as you said, vanilla Destiny. So Peter Dinklage doing the voice and all that stuff. And
Peter Dinklage, exactly. Yeah.
And I played Destiny, vanilla Destiny as well, and I did not like it at all.
A lot of people didn't.
Yeah, I maybe put about 10 hours into it before I was kind of like, nope, done. And then to hear your incredible experience, it almost makes me want to go back and play it to see if I missed something, I
mean, again, don't get me wrong. I think a big part of that was we had a group of people that were playing it. And that game didn't really start until you completed the main story campaign. That's when the game started. And it just became about the grind. And again, I'd never played games like World of Warcraft or any of these other MMOs where it is literally just grinding over and over again. And I had no sort of concept or experience of that at all. So like the way that it just hooked you and got you to just like, I'd happily sit and play the same content week after week after week to get the next bit of armor or the next gun or whatever. I think it was designed in a very well designed game, but 100%. I know a lot of my friends who just couldn't get on board with it and didn't even finish the story campaign because they were just like, it's not for me.
Yeah.
But again, I think back then, and that's what they changed with Destiny 2, is they made Destiny 2 much more accessible for the casual gamer. So you could just pick up and play for an hour after you've been to work.
Right.
Whereas Destiny 1 was, well, I hope you're prepared to sit here for 14 hours grinding through it because you're not going to level up if you don't. But 100% it was the sort of friendship group and the community that I had playing that at the same time. And when they started to tail off, the game became less fun. And we all sort of stopped playing it because all of a sudden, if you've not got 6 of you playing, you can't do a lot. You can't do the main end game activities. So you end up trying to find people online to play with. But as I'm sure you're aware, with many games and many gaming communities, there's lots of toxic people kicking about, and it suddenly becomes not enjoyable at all. So
yeah, I completely relate to that. I really don't do much online gaming anymore. Weirdly enough, it was the Xbox One that kind of stopped. On the Xbox 360, because I got several brothers all roughly around the same age, and we spent days, weeks, and playing things like Gears of War 2 multiplayer and all, and loving it. And Xbox One just came along and don't really do it anymore. Really do anymore, you know? Yeah.
It's one of them things where I think when you don't want to be getting annoyed or having to do competitive gaming, and you literally want to just, the whole point of it is I want to come in and relax and I want to play something and wind down. I don't want to be playing online with people who are going to wind me up, or if it is a competitive game, people that I can't compete with, because like at the end of the day, my reactions are not as quick as some like 13-year-old who's just going to be playing Call of Duty and ridiculous. So I'm not going to be able to compete. So again, I've got quite a few friends who just jacked in online gaming, still enjoy gaming, still enjoy playing, but absolutely zero interest in either competitive or playing online.
Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, I don't know if you have, but I've never played Fortnite, and I'm consistently glad I've never played it.
I think there was literally, I've only ever watched people playing it 2 or 3 times and just thought, one, I don't really like third person competitive games like that because I don't get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, 2, just like the building aspect of it.
It's weird.
And when you see how quickly people do it, and all in less than a second, there's like a tower that they're stood on the top of.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't get this, because suddenly it's not all about the skill required in being able to shoot someone. It's a whole other skill of how quickly can you. And again, it is a skill. Don't get me wrong, but it's not something that I'm interested in developing or getting better at, because I know there's going to be some like 9-year-old prodigy that's going to destroy me at it, and it's like, I'm not signing up for getting absolutely battered.
Yeah, you don't need that much of a bruising, you know. Why choose it? I have to ask then, considering your connection, obviously in the band, and the fact that you're so heavily into gaming, is Twitch and stuff like that ever something you've considered doing? Streaming?
I mean, it is a little bit, and only the more, because I've only recently started watching a lot more streamers, mainly because I never used to understand it. I used to always be like, why do you not want to play the game? Why would you sit and watch somebody else playing a game when you could play it? Yeah. But then, like I touched on it before, of, you know, people who perhaps aren't heavily into gaming could sit and watch someone else play it and love it. But yeah, like it's sort of, I now do it to wind down. It's like if I play games for a couple of hours of an evening, the last 45 minutes before I try and go to bed, or turn the PC off or whatever, I'll sit and watch Twitch for a little bit, because I'm not playing, so I'm not as wired and getting into it, but I'm still sort of in the gaming world a little bit. And the more I've sort of done that, I've realized that you don't have to be these out there characters.
Of course.
Because again, I enjoy playing games like Apex Legends and a few other things, but I am in no way competitive. Like I don't even claim to be good at it. I just enjoy playing it. So I always thought, well, I can't stream something like that because no one's going to want to watch me play that, because I'm not competitive. But then the more you look at it, there's people playing games like Age of Empires and Civilization, and like I really enjoy playing like RTS stuff. And you think, why would anybody want to sit and watch someone play Civilization when like nothing's happening? but people just want to relax and chill out, and you don't always want to watch someone who's dead animated and shouting all the time and doing all these things. Some people just want to log on, chill out, watch someone playing something like Final Fantasy or, you know, anything, just something on Switch, you know, just proper chilled out of, you know, bloody Animal Crossing or like Pokemon, you know, any of that, just sitting there and watching someone chill out. And you think, well, yeah, you could easily just get a little bit of a community going. And yeah, like I say, especially from a band point of view, it doesn't, if there was a band Twitch account, for example, it wouldn't even just need to be gaming.
No, of course.
One of the other lads could jump on at any point and just sit and have a bit of a chat one night or something, you know what I mean? It's definitely something that I've thought about. It's just whether we do something with it or.
It is, again, it's diving. It's not like stepping into a paddling pool. You're gonna have to jump in feet first, man.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, that was the main sort of eye opener for me on that, because I just always assumed, because before actually really watching Twitch, my only interaction with it was seeing people's highlight reels on YouTube and stuff. And obviously, one, they're only going to show you the best bits because it's a highlight reel.
Of course.
But two, it's always these really animated people, or, you know, there's something that's unique about them that gives them their big community, whether it's because they're absolutely incredible at a game, or, you know, it's because they're funny, or all these other things. And but I say equally, there's people who, all right, they might not have massive communities of like 20,000 people, but they're just chilled gamers, just like literally finding like-minded people who are happy to just chill out and play something simple.
There are people out there who will go to sleep with their favorite Twitch streamer on, not because they're screaming and shouting, but because they're just chilling out, talking softly about a game and doing, as I say, someone like Age of Empires is a great example where you can stream for hours and hours at a very chilled pace. I mean, some people might think that's strange. Oh, you're going to sleep with someone else? It's like, is that any different to you going to sleep with that film on? Is it not literally the same thing?
It's exactly the same thing, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's just because it's not a film or a TV series, or, you know, people now, you know, listen to white noise stuff. It's not even music, it's just literal white noise and things, because it's relaxing and helps people sleep. So if just, like I say, it's finding someone with the right tone of voice. If someone's got a relaxing tone of voice, you're not even necessarily bothered about what they're talking about. It's just relaxing to hear them speaking.
Folks that are watching, I'm sure you can agree that Liam has a very relaxing All right, last one for you, man, and then we're going to wrap this up. So we are going to go back to the band, and it's simply put, big UK tour in November. 11 days, sorry, 11 cities. I had to count to make sure. And I was like, have I doubled up here? And technically 12, because you got Damnation, about 2 weeks beforehand, the actual tour starts. It seems pretty obvious, but how much of a big deal is this to you, man? Like, how are you feel? I mean, it's so far away already, but how are you feeling about getting back out and doing those sort of shows?
Honestly, like, I just cannot wait to be gigging again. People get into bands for different reasons. Even like between the four of us, you know, some people prefer to, you know, would happily be a studio band and just keep creating music and putting it out there for people to hear and enjoy, and, you know, and wouldn't be bothered about never playing. Which again is fine. There's a lot of studio bands, or, you know, bands who only tour once every 10 years. It's like it worked, people do it. But, you know, we love creating stuff. We love being in the studio environment and hearing all that come together, because in a practice room, you know, it's there, but it's not under a microscope. Whereas all of a sudden in a studio, when it starts, you can hear it coming together. That's just magic. And then when you get to take that and play it in a live environment to people, and like I say, especially with the overwhelming reaction to the album, like, I can't wait to see how people enjoy it live. And I say, we just can't wait to get out there and start doing it again. But yeah, like you say, 11 days is going to be pretty grueling, because we've not done a run like that since touring with Ohms in 2018. So other than that, you know, I think we've only ever done like 3 or 4 day runs since then. So 11 is going to be a bit of a killer.
Yeah, you know what? I've seen you guys way too much, way before this date. That you played the Boston Music Rooms in London on that tour. Yeah, because I was there.
Because that was with Mountain Caller as well.
Yeah.
And Ern, I think, played. Was it Ern?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
And then last time you played Bloodstock, what was it? It was 20. I'm using my years of Bloodstock. 2019. It was 2019.
Yeah, it will have been, because there would have been one last year.
The one last time. Yeah, exactly that. God, these things. Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for it. You're at Damnation. I'm at Damnation. You're at the Boston Music Rooms again in London. Already going. So yeah, you'll see me at least.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what the new songs sound like live as well. I mean, that's the most exciting thing as well. How on earth are you going to build a set list out of all the music you have with the new stuff?
This is always the challenging thing. And I mean, we always have a running joke with Paul anyway, because if it was up to Paul, we'd play all the new album and that's it. It's like, well, they're done. They've all had the day. And it's like, and again, he is only joking, but it is hard, especially, when there are 7 really strong tracks on this album. Like it was even the other day we were going through and saying, right, well, what would we do if we had to go back and pick, say, 2 off each album? Which tracks would we pick? So even that was hard enough. And it's like with all the Melted stuff, again, it never really influenced things too much. And Matt was always very quick to point out that we didn't have to do things, but we didn't really play too many older tracks because there was no keyboard on them. So I guess as much as Matt said he wasn't bothered and he'd rather just the set be the set, and if it means he's only playing on 2 or 3 songs, it means he's only playing on 2 or 3 songs. But if we were driving from Wigan to London to play a 40-minute set and only 2 of those have got him playing keys on them, it was never really
I completely understand.
fair to sort of now we've got. So that was why, and again, it almost became like a running joke, and we sort of saw people talking about it on social media, but it was always like, oh, I wonder if they're going to play Melted on the Inch in order again. And it's like, well, yeah, that was the set for a long time. But again, it was a choice because those songs were arranged in that way, because that was part of like the piece of it. There was a flow to them. So that's why they were played in that order live as well. But yeah, it's definitely going to be hard to pick a set list, because obviously we're open to even playing some of the older tunes, but then you've got the downside of the Melted tracks not having perhaps the same impact because there's going to be no keyboard parts on them. But yeah, like with stuff like this, we're even now at the minute we're trying to add more elements in with like vocal. So like me and Steve are trying to add in like some backing and some harmonies and stuff, because there's a lot of harmonies that Alex has put on this latest album that need to be there. Like they sound really good, so we're trying our best to get them in there as well. So that'll be a whole other element that we've never had live before.
We've got good, what's that, 5 months? 5 months? Yeah, plenty of time to sort this stuff out.
Well, that's it. And obviously we don't want to leave it too long before we get cracking on new stuff again. So we don't want to wait another 3 years before something's written and recorded. So it's just trying to get the balance of, we've got a bit of time now to maybe start working on some newer stuff, and then a bit closer to the tour, then we'd have to go back and relearn the tunes. But like I say, at the same time, we want to keep these ones fresh, and me and Steve want to keep practicing harmonies and stuff. So it's all about juggling the time and splitting it as effectively as we can.
And on that note, man, you're going to be incredibly busy. I've already taken up way too much of your time this evening.
Listen, man, I could happily sit and talk about games and stuff all night. So no doubt we'll be able to carry on conversations either at Damnation or at Boston Music Rooms.
Yeah, man, hopefully we'll have more to talk about then, the new stuff then. Liam, man, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, man.
No worries at all. Thank you very much for asking me. I say it's been massively enjoyable, and anytime I'm always more than happy to sit and talk about games and music and everything else. There's nothing better.
Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?